My name is Goldie, I'm 27 now, and if you look at it from the outside, you can say that I've achieved everything I wanted in life. I have a good job that provides me with a stable income, my own home, equipped to my liking, and enough money to afford a comfortable life without constant worries about tomorrow. But the path to this was so difficult, full of unexpected turns, pain, and disappointment that I could never even imagine what I have to go through to get here. It all started when I was 15, and that year my life split into before and after. My mother died suddenly, leaving me and my father alone, and although he desperately tried to keep everything under control, it was clear that he was slowly but surely falling apart, drowning in his grief, even if he tried not to show it to me. However, a year later, when it seemed to me that things couldn't get any worse, he broke the stunning news to me, which turned everything upside down. "Goldie, I want you to meet Brenda," he said one evening when I walked into the kitchen and saw him standing next to a woman who looked barely older than my college cousin. And when he squeezed her hand in his and added, "We're getting married," it took me a few seconds to make sense of his words. Brenda was at least 15 years younger than Dad, and with her came her 5-year-old daughter Kayla, a tiny, noisy creature literally overflowing with energy. From the very first day, Brenda made it clear to me that she considered me to be some kind of unwanted guest who, by some ridiculous coincidence, stayed here longer than he should have, and this manifested itself in the little things that became more and more obvious. She passed me in the hallway without saying a word, or started whispering to Dad when I came into the room, as if my presence was interfering with their conversation. But Kayla, she was different at first. This little bundle of energy burst into my room with endless enthusiasm without knocking, jumped on the bed, hugging a teddy penguin to himself, and asked with a wide smile, "Goldie, can we watch SpongeBob?" At such moments, I felt something like happiness, because I always wanted to have a younger sister, and it seemed that, despite the strangeness of the situation, something good could come out of it. But it didn't last long. The changes started gradually. At first, Kayla stopped coming to my room after school, then she started making vague excuses when I suggested watching TV together. But everything finally fell into place when one day I heard Brenda talking to her in the kitchen. "Honey, you don't have to spend so much time with Goldie." Her voice was sweet, almost affectionate, but those words made my stomach clench. "She's not really your sister, you know that, right? She's just your father's other daughter." And then I understood. I understood why Brenda always avoided me, why Kayla suddenly began to distance herself, why every dinner turned into a painful ordeal during which I felt superfluous at this table. It wasn't a random snippet of their conversation. It was a clear, cold-blooded calculation, a plan that Brenda brought to life slowly but surely. And Kayla, being just a child, just followed her mother, and the more she did it, the more lonely I felt. After that, I stopped trying. What was the point? Every time Kayla looked through me at dinner, or turned away as she passed me in the hallway, it hurt, and I realized that the only way out was to focus on what I could control, and that was studying. I put everything into it. Every minute, every grain of energy, every gram of effort, and it paid off. When I was accepted to college on a full scholarship, I felt the taste of freedom, real, genuine, pungent, like fresh air after a long stay in a stuffy room. After college, my career took off, and every year brought more and more opportunities. Big projects, high salaries, independence. I finally found the life I dreamed of, where I didn't have to look back on the past and remember the days I spent in a house where I was nobody. I had my own apartment, fashionable clothes, the opportunity to dine in expensive restaurants and fly wherever I wanted for the weekend. I no longer had to count every penny, wear worn-out clothes, or justify my existence. But then the phone rang, which changed everything. "Goldie," my father's voice on the other end of the phone was kind of hesitant, almost shy, and at that moment, without knowing why, I suddenly felt my heart tight. "How are you, honey?" I was so surprised that I almost dropped my coffee mug. I immediately realized that this call did not bode well, because there was not just excitement in Brenda's voice, but some kind of fake, unnaturally uplifted tone that she always used when she tried to pass off her desires as something that should concern me personally, but I had no choice, other than taking a deep breath and asking, "What is the special event?" "Oh, Goldie, you have no idea." Brenda almost clapped her hands. Her voice sounded so joyful, and I could almost see her face with that forced smile she used every time she wanted to get her way. "It's going to be great, a family celebration, a real celebration, just great. We're giving Kayla a birthday party, but not just a birthday, but a real ball." I pulled the phone away from my ear a little bit, trying to make sense of what I'd heard, because if it weren't for the fact that Kayla was really about to turn 18, I would have thought that Brenda was joking. It seemed absurd to arrange something that she calls a ball, but knowing her, I understood that it didn't just occur to me to invest a lot of money in this, but that she was going to drag me into another financial adventure. "That's great." I tried to keep my voice level, anticipating which way the conversation was going to turn. "Really?" Brenda sounded like she was really waiting for my approval, but I knew she didn't really care. "I knew you would understand, because this is such an important day for Kayla. She is becoming an adult, and we want to do the best for her." I heard someone say something in the background. It looked like it was Dad, but I couldn't make out the words. "Of course, we would like you to participate in this," Brenda continued after a short pause. "Did you participate?" I repeated, trying not to sound wary. "Oh, honey, you know, these things cost money," she said, and there was a note in her voice that I'd come to know all too well over the past few months. "We've already rented a beautiful room, ordered catering, found a decorator, and you have no idea how much the dress Kayla chose costs. And here we come to the point." "So you need money," I said in a flat voice, no longer trying to pretend that I didn't understand. "Well, you know, we're all a family, we support each other," Brenda began, but I interrupted her. "How much?" "Oh, honey, that's not much compared to how much it means to Kayla." Brenda seemed to ignore the question, her voice ringing with intense sweetness. "How much, Brenda?" I repeated, clutching the phone tighter. A second of silence, then a sigh. 10,000, she finally said, and I felt something tighten inside me. I was expecting a large sum, but even for Brenda it was too much. 10,000, I asked, trying to stay calm. "You know, everything has gone up in price. We really tried to cut costs, but Kayla deserves the best." Brenda spoke faster now, as if she was trying to convince me before I said no. I didn't answer right away because anger was building up inside me. All this time I've been helping them, paying their bills, closing their debts, and now they're not even trying to hide that they see me as just a purse with legs. "I'll think about it," I said dryly, and before Brenda could launch into her usual persuasion, I added, "I have to go." I hung up without even saying goodbye and threw the phone on the table. All these months, I've been trying to convince myself that I'm doing the right thing by helping them, because family should help each other. But now it seemed to me that it was never about family. It was always about how far they could go, how much I would let them use me. I spent the next day at work trying not to think about the conversation, but when I got home that evening, my phone rang again, and when I looked at the screen and saw Kayla's number, something inside me flinched. She never called me. "Hello," I said, pressing the answer button. There were a few seconds of silence, then her voice, low and strained. "Goldie, can you come?" I straightened up, feeling alarmed. "What happened?" "Just, please," she spoke almost in a whisper, and there was panic in her voice. "I can't explain it over the phone, but I really need to talk to you." "Are you okay? I'm already reaching for the keys." "Yes, no, I don't know," Kayla stammered. "Just please come." There was something in her voice that made me forget all my doubts and resentments. "I'll be there in 20 minutes, I said, and before I even had time to turn off the phone, I was already leaving the apartment. I arrived at the party a little earlier than planned, not so much out of excitement as out of a desire to make sure that everything was going according to plan. I had spent too much time, effort, and money organizing this evening, and although I wanted to believe that this celebration would be a step towards reconciliation, where there was still a doubt in the back of my mind, wouldn't this turn out to be another disappointment, another attempt to build a bridge where a chasm had been dug for a long time? The backyard was decorated much more lavishly than I expected. Garlands of lights were hung between the trees, the air smelled of fresh flowers, and in the center of the courtyard was a long table set for 24 people. I even noticed a small improvised dance floor. Apparently, the brand couldn't resist and decided to add something more spectacular to the modest celebration. Goldie, Brenda emerged from the house, beaming with her strained but seemingly sincere smile. "You've arrived. Oh, honey, it turned out so great, didn't it?" She came closer and threw a hug at me, but I couldn't bring myself to respond in kind. "You're clearly a little over budget," I remarked, looking around the set, but Brenda just laughed, waving me off. "Oh, come on, it's an important day. We just wanted it to be perfect." I resisted the urge to roll my eyes. Of course, Brenda always wanted everything to look perfect, even if it was a lie. "Where's Kayla?" I asked, looking around. "In her room, getting ready." Brenda smiled wider. "Oh, Goldie, you can't imagine how happy she'll be when she sees you're here." I didn't say anything. The guests started arriving shortly after my conversation with Brenda, and I found myself in the middle of a noisy stream of people. Kayla's friends, some mutual family acquaintances, even a few distant relatives whom I barely remembered. The atmosphere was festive and lively, but there was still a wariness and tension inside me that wouldn't let go. And finally, Kayla appeared. She came down the steps in her new dress, elegant, expensive, the kind I could never afford at her age, and for a moment it seemed to me that she was really happy, but as soon as she met my gaze, the same expression flashed across her face that I had seen many times before. A mixture of wariness, indifference, and something I couldn't quite decipher. "Happy birthday, Kayla," I said, coming closer. "Thank you," she replied briefly, almost automatically, then looked away, as if looking for an excuse to leave. "Can I talk to you for a minute?" I asked before she could disappear into the crowd. She froze, then nodded reluctantly. I took her a little to the side, where it was a little quieter, and gathering my thoughts said, "I wanted to give you a special gift." Kayla frowned slightly, but didn't say anything. "I know you're planning to go to university, and I thought," I paused, then exhaled, "I'd like to pay for your tuition." There was silence for a moment. "You, what?" Her voice sounded strange, as if she wasn't sure if she'd heard correctly. "I'll pay for your college," I repeated, completely. Something like shock flashed across her face, but then it became closed again, impenetrable. "Why, what is it?" she asked, and there was no joy in her voice, only suspicion. "Because you're my sister," I replied simply. Kayla opened her mouth to say something, but suddenly Brenda was there, who literally jumped into the conversation, grabbed Kayla by the shoulders and kissed her loudly on the cheek. "Oh, honey, that's just wonderful." "What is it?" she exclaimed. "Goldie, what a great job you are, this is such an incredible gift." Kayla tensed, and it seemed to me that for a moment there was something like annoyance in her eyes, but she quickly lowered her gaze. "Thank you," she murmured, but there was no emotion in her voice. Brenda's smile was too wide, too forced. "Oh, we need to celebrate this. Let's tell everyone." She was already reaching for a glass of champagne, but Kayla suddenly turned around and quickly went inside, leaving me alone with Brenda, who instantly changed her expression to a more serious one. "Would you really do that?" "What is it?" she asked softly, with a strange note in her voice. "Yes," I replied, looking her straight in the eye. Brenda thought for a moment, then her face lit up with her usual smile again. Well, that's really generous of you, Goldie, she said, but I could hear something strange in her voice, like hidden displeasure. Kayla will definitely appreciate it. But at that moment, for the first time, I had the feeling that it wasn't just about money. I was sitting surrounded by all these carefully planned details, a menu with marked dishes, an invitation list that I helped adjust, and receipts for thousands of dollars that went to this party. And then I looked at the dark laptop screen and suddenly realized that I no longer felt angry. No, instead I felt strange, icy calm, as if some important part of me had finally realized that this game was over and it was time to come out of it with my head held high. I picked up the phone again, but this time not to beg someone for recognition or to demand an explanation. I just dialed the number of the catering company, and when the manager answered, said that I wanted to change the delivery address. Of course, miss, he said cheerfully, unaware that he was now becoming part of a small act of revenge. Where exactly? I gave them the address of a homeless shelter near my house and asked them to bring all the food there. Oh, that's very generous of you, the manager said, and there was genuine admiration in his voice. I just want this food to reach those who really appreciate it, I replied, and for the first time in many years, I felt a weight lift from my shoulders that I hadn't even realized until that moment. Then I dialed the number of the equipment tenant, who was supposed to deliver tables, chairs, and all the other holiday paraphernalia. Oh, miss, but they've already been paid, the operator said in surprise. I know, I replied calmly, but I want to cancel the order. But what should I tell the organizers? Tell them that the customer has changed his mind, I said with a slight smile. The cake was next. I looked at the candy store's number, then thought it would be too easy to cancel it, so I did something better. Good afternoon, the manager replied happily. Hello, I said, trying to sound confident. I would like to change the text on the cake. Of course, what would you like to write? I paused and then slowly, clearly dictated. Thank you for reminding me who I am. The manager hesitated a bit. Are you sure? Absolutely, I said, and imagined Brenda blowing out the candles, surrounded by her relatives, and only then seeing this inscription. I completed all the calls, and for the first time in recent days I felt free. In the evening, I poured myself a glass of wine and settled into an armchair on the balcony, watching the sun slowly go out over the horizon, and suddenly realized that for the first time in a long time, I was not trying to impress anyone, not trying to earn someone's approval, not running after the illusory hope of acceptance. I was just sitting and enjoying silence. I didn't go to that party. But judging by the calls that tore through my phone over the next day, the evening clearly didn't turn out the way they expected. I didn't expect it to sink in so quickly, but after a few hours, my phone started ringing. At first it was Brenda, but when I put the phone on Do Not Disturb mode, I didn't hear her screeching accusations or her attempts to get out and make me feel guilty. Then there was the father. He called 3 times in a row, then sent a short message. Goldie, call me back. We need to talk. I read it, put a cup of coffee on the table, and for a moment I wondered if I should answer at all. But then she picked up the phone and pressed the call button. He picked up the phone almost immediately. Goldie, he began, and there was no anger or annoyance in his voice, just the weariness with which he spoke every time he tried to resolve the conflict between me and Brenda. Is that true? No, I replied calmly, leaning back in my chair. I didn't cancel anything. All the food was delivered, just not to where you expected. But why? He sighed, and I heard him cover the phone, trying to muffle the screams in the background. Brenda was probably still having her tantrum. Because, Dad, I said, looking at the sun slowly sinking to the horizon, your family has made it clear to me that I am not a part of this celebration, so I don't have to pay for it. Goldie, that's not true. That's exactly it, I interrupted, not with malice, but with the same icy clarity that had settled in me from the very moment Kayla called and said she was taking me off the guest list. Did you hear what she said to me? That I'm nothing to her. He paused. I gave him a few seconds to process it, and then I added, I've been trying to be a part of this family for a long time. I paid your bills, financed your life, hoping that this would somehow give me the right to be called your daughter. But as it turned out, all you wanted from me was money. That's not true, he repeated, but now even he sounded unconvincing. Then tell me, Dad, I sighed, why didn't you ever protect me? Why did I let Brenda raise Kayla with the idea that I was a stranger? I heard him exhale sharply, but he couldn't come up with an answer. That's what I mean, I said. Take care of yourself, Dad. And without waiting for an answer, she hung up. That was the end of the evening for me. The next day, I received a letter. It was paper, sealed in a cream-colored envelope that looked like it had been held in his hands for hours, wondering whether to send or not. I tore open the paper, took out a folded piece of paper and unfolded it. Goldie, I do not know why I am writing you this letter. Probably because I can't say it out loud. I ruined everything, didn't I? You probably expected me to at least say thank you, but I just can't. I've been learning for so long to see you as a stranger that when you did something I never expected, I didn't know how to handle it. I didn't ask you to pay for my college, but you offered it just like that, without demanding anything in return. And I was scared. It's scary that you turned out to be better than I thought, that maybe Brenda was wrong, that maybe I was wrong, I was afraid of that. And instead of admitting that I care about you, I did what I always do, I pushed you away. I do not know why you were still trying to be my sister. I probably don't deserve it, but if it's still possible, I'd like to try. Only this time, for real, no lies, without a brand. It's just you and me. I don't expect you to forgive me. But maybe one day we can start over. Kayla. I reread the letter twice. And then, without hesitation, she reached for her phone and dialed a familiar number. I sat looking at the trash can, where the same frame with my unrealized promise now lay among the crumpled papers, old receipts and empty envelopes, and I felt a strange, unlike anything else, not anger, not disappointment, not resentment, but rather relief, as if I had finally shaken off a heavy burden, which she carried on her shoulders for years without even realizing it. My phone was still on the table, the screen lit up with notifications. Missed calls from Dad, one message from Kayla, short, without a hint of emotion, "Are you serious?" And a whole tirade from Brenda, which began with accusations, turned into complaints and ended with a cold, calculating, "You're going to regret this." No, Brenda, I won't regret it. I knew that this conversation with Dad would be the last straw, and now there was a final line between us that no one could erase, but it no longer bothered me. Does the family help the family? Sure. Only I was never perceived as a part of this family. I was a convenient wallet, a source of financing for their whims. But now that this resource is blocked, they will have to find a new way of existence. I picked up my phone, opened a chat with Kayla, looked at her message, and briefly considered whether to respond. Maybe there was something more hidden in her words. Maybe she really wanted to say something, but I remembered her voice on the phone, cold, distant, almost contemptuous, when she crossed me off the guest list, and realized that I no longer wanted to guess what she really was. Dealey feels it. I clicked delete. The chat has disappeared. As soon as I did, there was a knock on the door. He was sharp, impatient, as if the person behind the door had been standing there for a long time, gathering his thoughts. But without waiting for me to get in touch, he decided to take action. I took a deep breath, got up and went to the door, knowing in advance who I would see. When I opened it, Kayla was standing in the doorway. "Are you serious?" She repeated aloud what she had already written in the message, looking at me with an expression that mixed anger, disappointment, and something like hope. "Absolutely," I replied calmly. She pressed her lips together, looked away, as if trying to control her emotions. "You really won't pay for my college?" Really?" She took a sharp breath, then looked at me again, but in a different way, not with a challenge, but rather with an attempt to understand what I wanted, why everything had changed so much. Why? I chuckled. Are you seriously asking? Yes, she blurted out, clenching her fists. Because you suggested it, Goldie. It was your gift. It was your idea. Yes, I nodded, crossing my arms over my chest. And then you cut me out of your life, bluntly stated that I was not your family, and then your parents decided that my only duty to you was to pay for whatever you wanted. It was, she paused, then sighed as if deciding something for herself. It was wrong. I raised my eyebrows in surprise. What? I'm saying it was wrong, she repeated, but in a lower voice now. That's what I said. What I did, was I don't know. Angry, confused. It seemed to me that you just wanted to buy my affection, that you were doing this not because you wanted to, but because you were trying to prove something to yourself. But I realized that this was not the case. I stared at her intently, trying to make out if she was being sincere, or if this was just another attempt to regain control. What do you want now? Kayla bit her lip, then smiled weakly. I don't know, maybe some coffee. I was silent for a few seconds, then nodded and stood aside to let her inside. Coffee is just coffee. Perhaps this story wasn't over yet. I looked at the phone screen, at that short, pathetic please, and for the first time in a long time I felt completely free. Free from the guilt that had held me down for years, forcing me to cling to the faint hope of being accepted, free from obligations that no one really put on me by right, but which I took on voluntarily, as if hopping to buy love and recognition. Free from this endless play in which I've been playing a role for years, but I've never been the main character. I put my phone away without answering, and calmly finished my coffee. The next day, Brenda and Dad made one last attempt to break through my new barrier between us. I had just left the office and was heading to my car when I saw them. They stood near the parking lot like two predators, waiting for the moment when the victim would be trapped. Dad looked exhausted, aged, his face haggard as if he had lost more than 1 year of his life in the last week. Brenda, on the other hand, was on alert. Her arms were crossed over her chest, her expression was icy, her gaze was prickly, as if she was going to tear me apart right there, in front of passers-by. I stopped, but not because I was afraid, but because I was suddenly overwhelmed by indifference. Goldie, Dad took a step forward, but I didn't move, just stared at him. We need to talk, Brenda added, and there wasn't a trace of that sugary sweetness in her voice that she always used when she was trying to manipulate me. There's nothing to talk about anymore, I replied calmly. What's that about? Brenda flared up instantly, like a dry match. You've ruined everything. You turned Kayla's birthday into a nightmare. You humiliated us in front of our friends, in front of the whole family. I chuckled. Oh, so it's my fault now. Not Kayla, who cut me out of her life, not you, who for years did everything to turn her against me but me. Dad sighed heavily and took another step towards me. Goldie, honey, let's not dig into the past right now. We've all said and done a lot of stupid things. Brenda was probably too harsh. Kayla was too emotional, but we're a family, and we need to find a way to sort this out. I looked at him, and suddenly I saw in front of me not the man I remembered as a child, not the father who had always been my support, but a man who for many years turned away when Brenda pointedly ignored me, who allowed Kayla to grow up, convinced that I was nobody to her, who turned a blind eye to that, how I was slowly squeezed out of his life. You've never been on my side, Dad, I said softly. Never. He froze. You let Brenda cross me out. You let Kayla think I was a stranger. And now that I've finally realized that I really am, you suddenly decide that we should be one family. Dad opened his mouth, but didn't say anything. Do you want me to become comfortable again, obedient, ready to pay for all your desires? I continued. So that I could return to the role that suited you, to become a person you can ignore again until you need the money. Goldie, you're getting it all wrong. Brenda exploded, but I turned to her and looked straight into her eyes. No, Brenda, I got it absolutely right. It's just that now you don't like that I don't play by your rules anymore. Brenda pursed her lips, and Dad seemed to wilt, as if my words had finally sunk in. I'm leaving, I said, taking a step toward my car, and don't try to follow me. Are you really going to give up your family that easily? What is it? He asked, and there was bitterness in his voice. I froze, my hand already on the door handle of the car, then turned around and looked into his eyes. I've never had a family, Dad. And with that, I got in the car, closed the door, and drove off without looking back. I moved in the next day. I've been thinking about this for a long time, but now this decision has become inevitable. I found a new apartment in a different neighborhood, without the memory of Brenda and Kayla's endless visits, without the anxious expectation of phone calls, without the feeling that at any moment my past would knock on the door again. I changed my phone number, giving it only to those I really trusted. I did what I had been afraid of for so long. I broke the bond that had only been poisoning my life. And for the first time in a long time, I felt truly free. I stared at the phone screen, at the last missed call from an unknown number. Then, without a shadow of a doubt, I blocked it, just as I blocked everyone who tried to bring me back to the past that I had so painstakingly left behind. Now my life belonged only to me, and this realization brought a strange, incomparable satisfaction. 6 months have passed since I put an end to my role as a family sponsor, and during that time my life has found a rhythm that it did not have before. A rhythm free from endless alarm bells, manipulative requests, and a sense of duty to those who have never seen anything in me. Except for the wallet. I started doing things that brought me joy again, without regard for other people's needs and expectations. I signed up for art classes that I dreamed of when I was a student, started going to the gym, and for the first time in many years, I allowed myself to think about a real vacation. Not a short weekend getaway, but a full-fledged trip to a place where no one would know my name. And all this time, I didn't hear from Kyle, Dad, or Brand anymore, until one day Lisa sent me a message. Did you hear that? I looked at the screen, wondering for a while if I even wanted to know the details. But in the end, curiosity got the better of me, and I replied. Tell me. A few minutes later, the phone rang. Oh, Goldie, you won't believe this. Lisa didn't even say hello. Her voice was full of delight, and I realized she was having a hard time holding back her laughter. It's just unbelievable. I'm waiting, I reminded her. Well, do you remember how they kept telling Kayla that they had savings for her college? Yes, I nodded, even though Lisa couldn't see it. Well, they lied, came another chuckle. They didn't have any savings, they spent all the money on, guess what? Not Tommy. Get a new SUV. I almost choked on my coffee. You're kidding. Absolutely not. Lisa sounded like she was really enjoying this story. They bought a car 6 months ago because they were sure that you would pay for Kayla's studies. Like, why save money when they have such a wonderful, generous, rich eldest daughter? I leaned back in my chair in disbelief, but deep down, this news didn't surprise me at all. Of course they did. Of course, they were sure that I would open the wallet again. And what happened next? I asked, barely able to contain my grin. Oh, Kayla made a real spectacle. Lisa was no longer trying to hide her amusement. According to the neighbors, her screams could be heard 3 houses away. At first, she demanded that they take out a loan to pay for her college, but it turned out that their credit history was a complete nightmare, so no bank gave them the money. Then she said that they should sell the car. I chuckled. And what about Brenda? Oh, you know Brenda. Lisa laughed again. She said that she needed this car to work in real estate, and that Kayla would just have to put up with it. Oh yes, because it's important to the clients what she drives. I rolled my eyes. Exactly, Lisa grinned. Anyway, Kayla is now staging something like a protest. She refuses to get a job, refuses to move out, sits in her room, and comes out only to make a new scandal. I imagined this picture. Kayla, who grew up believing that everyone in the world owed her, was now faced with the fact that even her own parents weren't going to give her everything for nothing. She's using their tactics against them, I said, realizing the irony of the situation. Absolutely, Lisa confirmed. She learned manipulation from the best. She's watched Brenda drive you to guilt for years, and now she's using the same tactics on her parents. I smiled, feeling not schadenfreude but satisfaction. After all, it wasn't my problem. What do you think will happen next? Lisa chuckled. Give them a month, I think they'll sell the car. I think so too, I agreed. There was silence, but this time it was light, relaxed. Well, how are you? Lisa asked, switching to a softer tone. I smiled. I'm fine. For the first time in a long time, it's really good. That's great. We said goodbye, and I put my phone on the table, leaning back in my chair again. Soft light filtered through the window. There was a painting on the wall that I had recently painted in art classes, and on the table were printouts with the roots of my future vacation. A real vacation where I could spend my money on myself and not on other people's whims. I was no longer the one who repeatedly offered my shoulder so that someone could lean on it, without thinking about how I felt. And for the first time in a long time, my life belonged only to me.